All right, well, let's get started tonight in a word of prayer. Pray with me. Father, I thank you for tonight and the opportunity that we have to come into your house and to open your word to discuss it. I pray that at this time you please come and speak through me and speak into the lives of each of the youth that are here this evening. May it be glorifying to you and edifying us. And I pray this in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so let me open up with a question. What is some of the greatest love stories you've ever seen or heard or read?
Romeo and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet.
The Muppets.
The Muppets. What Muppets?
Kermit and Miss Piggy.
All right. Who else? Faith.
The Titanic.
The Titanic. Any others? No? All right. Well, tonight we're going to be in the book of Ruth. And in the book of Ruth, there's many love stories in there intertwined. So, in the book of Ruth, there is a few different love stories all within this one greater, bigger story. And so, as we go through this book, we're going to see this, and we're going to, at the end, we're going to look at how some of them even apply to us today directly. Okay? So, open up to Ruth. Ruth is found in the Old Testament. You got Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, and then Ruth. And so Ruth opens up, and you. So Ruth, chapter 1, verse 1 says, "In the days when the judges ruled, there was famine in the land." And so that points to the fact that Ruth is placed here right after Judges because it's placed in the time of the Judges. We see that here. It's not, most of the books in the New Testament have a writer. You know, they say Paul, or we can figure out who their writer is. Nobody in the book of Ruth comes out and says, "Hey, this is me and I'm writing this book." It's an anonymous book. Okay? And I think this is important to note. I think one of the reasons why it's anonymous is it's anonymous to highlight the story and not so much who wrote it. Because sometimes when you're studying a book, both Old and New Testament, who writes it kind of overshadows or clouds what it says. Like, if we know Moses wrote it, then we're going to read it a certain way because we know Moses wrote it. Like the Pentateuch, the first 5 books. And same in the New Testament. If we know Paul wrote it, then we're going to read it a little bit differently because we know Paul wrote it. But since we don't know exactly who wrote the book of Ruth, it really points us to highlighting the text and not the author. And so, does anyone know anything about the book of Judges? Anything at all? No? Well, what happens in the book of Judges, this is important to know before we get to the book of Ruth. What happens is they have, it's a cycle. These same cycles happen over and over again. Okay? So what happens is at this point in Judges, the nation of Israel gets into the promised land. Okay, that happens at the beginning of Joshua. So they're in the promised land, and they're being ruled, and there's prophets overseeing it. And what happens is these prophets come when the nation of Israel is sinning against God. And so what happens is a cycle of they're good for a little bit and they get bad. And then another prophet comes and they get good for a little bit and they get bad. And then all throughout the book of Judges, this is the same cycle where they go from good to bad, and as it goes on, they just get worse and worse and worse. Where we get to the end of the book of Judges, and really, there was no religious or moral standards. It was whatever they wanted to do is what they did. At the nation of Israel, the people of God, this is what was happening. And so what Ruth does is it comes along in the time of Judges, and it provides a calmness. It shows us that people were still faithful to God in this time when it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse for the people of God. Okay? So, another thing that's very interesting is the fact that ancient literature, or the books of the Old Testament, are very male-dominated. Okay, they're told from a male perspective, which is very interesting because there's all women here. So they're told from a male point of view. Even the New Testament, they're told from a male point of view most of the time. But Ruth is told from a perspective of two low-class women, which also points to the importance and the impact that they had, both within the people of God and the fact that the book is named after a woman as well. Only this book, one other book are named after Esther, are named after women in the Bible. So, that's also something very, very interesting. It's very extraordinary, if you would. So, as we look at the book of Ruth, look with me there. Our text is going to be 4:1 through 12. That's where we're going to spend the chunk of the time. But to get there, we need to see the story. Okay? Because like I said, this is a love story. This is a love story that if Hollywood wanted to, they could make a movie out of it like that. They could very easily make this into a movie. Probably better than most of the love story movies that are out there. So, read with me. We're going to read the first few verses. Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. He and his wife and his 2 sons. Verse 2. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Ephraimites, I said that wrong, that's okay, from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left there with her 2 sons. And they took Moabite wives. The names of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the women were left there without her 2 sons and her husband. Okay, so this is the opening of the story. Okay, so let me draw you a little map here to set it up. So when it says they were in the land, what land did they start in? They started in the land and they left the land. Where did they start at?
Bethlehem.
Huh?
Bethlehem.
Where's Bethlehem found at?
Judah.
Judah, which is the promised land. Okay, so in this map, this is water. Okay, this is the Mediterranean Sea. And over here in the middle of Israel, there's another sea. It's called the Dead Sea. Okay, so Mediterranean Sea, Dead Sea. Bethlehem is somewhere in this area. Okay, this is the promised land. And Moab is a large chunk of this area over here. So what they did was they sojourned over here. So this was not a short journey. It was a fairly long journey they took. And it should be noted that they left the promised land. They left the land that God gave them and promised to prosper them there. Okay, they left this land that God had promised them. Because of that, the text doesn't directly apply this together, but the men died. So they could have died from natural causes, or it could have been divine judgment for them leaving the land they were supposed to be in. But either way, this is the story we're left at. So we have Elimelech, who's married to Naomi, and they have Mahlon and Chilion, which is a great name for a kid, I'd say, today. Chilion. I want to name my first kid Chilion. Be the Chill King. Okay, so, and so Chilion his wife was Orpah, and Mahlon, his wife, was Ruth. Okay, so this is where we're at so far in the story. Okay, so as we go on in the story, you continue on. What happens is they accept Naomi and Orpah and Ruth are together, and Naomi decides, I'm going to go back to Israel. I'm going to go back to my land. The famine is over now, the reason why they left the land in the original time. So what she says is she says, Orpah and Ruth, you guys stay here. Okay, this is your land. They're in Moab. It's her land. She says, you guys stay here, take wives. You're still young enough to take husbands. You guys are still young enough to take a husband, have kids, continue on that line. Orpah says, I will do that, and she remains, but Ruth says no. And if you read with me in verse 16, you see Ruth, chapter 1, verse 16. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you, or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I'll be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more so if anything, but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So we see here Ruth is loyal, not only to Naomi, but also to the God that Naomi brought to her. Okay? Naomi and Elimelech were Israelites. They brought their God with them to Moab and shared with her God. And evidently she knew a good amount about God, because she says, "No, I will stay with you and with your God, and I will worship your God instead of the gods of Moab." Okay? So, you see, continue on, they return. Verse 19. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi, but call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi, when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity against me?" So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Okay? So, here's what we need to know about the Moab people. Okay? The Moabites. Okay? The Moabites, let me start here. Do you know what the Samaritans are in the New Testament?